I arrived at my sister Mariam's house just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the roofs of her quiet neighborhood. The light made the walls glow a muted gold, giving the place an almost gentle warmth, one I hadn't felt in months. I stepped out of the car, stretched my stiff back, and tried to breathe in the comfort of being near family again. But a strange tightness gripped my chest, the same one that had followed me ever since I left my old life behind to start over. Mariam opened the door before I could knock. "You're finally here, Ryan," she said, her smile bright but rushed, as if it had been practiced in the mirror that morning. She hugged me tightly, her perfume familiar, grounding. Yet when she pulled back, I caught a flicker in her eyes, exhaustion, maybe frustration, before she smoothed it over. Behind her stood Armin, my brother-in-law. Tall, quiet, with an expression that rarely revealed more than politeness. He offered me a small nod. "Good to see you," he said. His voice carried a softness I didn't remember from before. He stepped aside to let me in, and although the gesture was simple, his gaze lingered a second too long, steady and searching, as though he was trying to read something in me I hadn't spoken aloud. The house felt unchanged, yet the air inside held something different, subtle, tense, almost as if conversations died in corners. Mariam busied herself with the kettle, moving quickly, almost gratefully escaping to the kitchen. Armin and I stood in the living room, an awkward stillness stretching between us. "You've been away for a long time," he finally said, folding his arms. His tone wasn't accusatory, more curious. "I needed space," I replied. "A fresh start. Somewhere quieter." He nodded as if he understood more than I'd said. Maybe he did. Armin had always had a way of observing without speaking, absorbing emotions others ignored. He wasn't expressive, but he wasn't oblivious either. When Mariam returned with tea, she joined our conversation but never settled. Her words came rushed, fragmented, as though her mind was pacing faster than her voice could keep up. She talked about work deadlines, neighbors she didn't like, bills, errands, her thoughts scattered like she was holding something together with thin thread. Armin listened silently, eyes cast downward, responding only when necessary. It was here, in this imbalance, the flurry of Mariam, the quiet of Armin, that I realized something was wrong. After dinner, Mariam excused herself, muttering about a last-minute task for the office. She closed the study door behind her, her silhouette stiff. Armin began clearing the plates without being asked. "Let me help," I said. He didn't protest. Side by side, we worked in quiet harmony, our movements unplanned yet strangely synchronized. When we finished, he leaned back against the counter and crossed his ankles, studying me again. "You seem heavier," he said softly. "Not physically, though maybe that too." He cracked the slightest smile, and I couldn't help laughing. "It's been a rough year," I admitted. "Rough years leave marks," he replied. "Even when you try to hide them." There was something in the way he said it, gentle, attentive, that made me feel suddenly exposed. Seen. I wasn't used to that. Most people glanced past me, never catching what I tried so hard to bury. But Armin looked like he could see straight through the layers I built around myself. Mariam reappeared briefly, her expression tight, her voice sharper than before. She announced she had to step out to pick something up from a colleague. "You two stay here. I'll be back soon." She didn't wait for a response. The door closed behind her, leaving a hollow quiet in her wake. Armin watched the door for a long second, then turned toward me. "There's a place I want to show you," he said, his voice suddenly lower, more deliberate. "Something I've never shown anyone." "A place?" I asked, confused. He nodded, his eyes steady on mine. "I call it Secret Rome." The name landed strangely between us, cryptic, unexpected. I opened my mouth to ask what it meant, but Armin simply gestured for me to follow, the seriousness in his expression both unsettling and strangely compelling. As I hesitated at the threshold between the hallway and whatever came next, I felt the pull of something I couldn't yet name, curiosity, maybe fate. Whatever it was, it promised that the night was about to shift in ways I wasn't prepared for. And still, I stepped forward. I followed Armin down the narrow hallway, the faint scent of old wood and faint incense curling around us. The house seemed smaller here, quieter, as if we had stepped out of the ordinary world and into something deliberately private. He stopped in front of a plain door I had never noticed before. He produced a small key from his pocket and fit it into the lock. The mechanism clicked softly, and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was unlike anything I expected. Warm light filtered from a solitary lamp in the corner, casting long shadows over shelves lined with journals, photographs, and carefully stacked notebooks. Paintings leaned against the walls, unfinished sketches of landscapes and faces, some real, some imagined. The air was thick with the faint musk of paper and wax, a comfort I didn't realize I had missed. "This is Secret Rome," Armand said, his voice low but steady. "It's where I come to think, to breathe, to be myself without anyone else watching." He gestured to a worn armchair by the lamp. "Sit, I want you to see it properly." I obeyed, my gaze wandering. Each item told a story I wasn't yet allowed to read fully, but I could feel the care and thought behind every detail. A photograph of Mariam as a child smiled from one shelf, next to a stack of blank journals and half-finished sketches of landscapes I didn't recognize. Nothing here was casual, everything had been chosen to speak to him alone. Armand leaned against a nearby wall, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. "I don't usually show this to anyone," he admitted, the words careful, deliberate. "Not even Mariam. It's private. I don't know why I'm showing it to you." I shook my head. "It's okay. I'm honored, actually." The word felt strange on my tongue, but it was true. I had rarely been invited into someone else's inner world so fully. "It's beautiful," I added, though the words seemed insufficient for the weight and intimacy of the space. He walked over and picked up a small notebook, its cover frayed. "I keep thoughts here, things I don't tell anyone. Confessions, fears, dreams." He glanced at me, a flicker of something vulnerable passing over his face. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone would ever understand." "I understand," I said quietly, even though I knew it was only partial truth. "I've been hiding pieces of myself for years, too." The words surprised me, spilling out before I could weigh them. I had never spoken them aloud. Armand's gaze held mine, steady, without judgment, and for a moment, it felt like being recognized for the first time in a long while. He nodded slowly. "I felt something the moment you arrived. I can't explain it." His voice wavered almost imperceptibly. "It's like finally seeing someone who fits where you don't belong anywhere else." The room seemed to shrink around us, the silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. I realized how rare it was to be this raw with someone I barely knew, and yet there was an ease, a strange comfort. I found myself sharing more than I intended, fragments of my life and identity, moments I had buried deep. I talked about my struggles with being openly gay, about the walls I built around myself, and the loneliness that lingered even in crowded rooms. Armand listened, head slightly tilted, absorbing every word. Occasionally, he would nod, or mutter softly in agreement. His eyes betrayed a depth of understanding that startled me. "I know that feeling," he admitted after a long pause. "To feel trapped in a life that isn't yours, to hide parts of yourself that you know matter." We shared a silence that wasn't empty, it was heavy, deliberate, charged. A connection had formed, fragile but undeniable. We were two people revealing private truths, standing at the edge of something unspoken, a tension that neither dared name aloud. Finally, Armand stepped back toward the lamp, running a hand along a shelf absent-mindedly. "I didn't plan for this, for you to see this side of me. But now that you have, I can't unsee it either." His words lingered in the room, a quiet admission of emotional closeness that felt both comforting and dangerous. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment, the fragile intimacy between us. "I won't forget it," I said. The words carried more than memory, they held understanding, recognition, and a silent promise of discretion. As I left Secret Rome later, I knew something had shifted between us. We had crossed an emotional threshold, one that could not be undone. And though nothing had been said about what would come next, the quiet understanding we shared promised that the night was far from over. The soft glow of Secret Rome lingered in my mind even as I followed Armand back toward the main hallway. The house felt quieter now, almost hollow, the ordinary walls carrying the weight of what we had shared. I could sense a subtle shift in the air between us, an unspoken understanding that what had begun in that room would not easily fade. Armand walked beside me, hands relaxed at his sides but shoulders tense, as if every step required careful thought. He didn't speak immediately, his silence was deliberate, almost reverent. I wanted to fill the quiet with words, but I realized none could capture the complexity of the tension between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Ryan, what we shared back there, it's different. I've never let anyone see that part of me before. And now, you have." I nodded, aware of a lump forming in my throat. I know, I felt it too. I didn't expect it, but it's real. Armin stopped in the hallway, turning to face me fully. His gaze held mine, searching for something I could not name. It's tempting, he admitted quietly, to step closer, to let this connection grow. But we both know the cost. Quote, I felt it immediately, the weight of Mariam's trust, the implicit loyalty that tethered both of us to boundaries we could not cross. Yet the pull of our shared vulnerability was undeniable, magnetic in a way that was frightening and exhilarating simultaneously. I'm aware, I said slowly, measuring each word. And I can't ignore it. But I also can't betray her, or myself. Armin's eyes softened, a mixture of relief and sorrow passing over his face. That's why I stopped myself, he confessed. Because even though I want to, I can't. Not without destroying something that matters. Not without losing you, or her. The silence that followed was heavy but necessary. We were both acutely aware of the invisible line that stretched between desire and responsibility. We had glimpsed something forbidden, and in that glimpse, we had recognized a truth about ourselves, but acknowledging it did not grant permission to act. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the choice we faced. I don't regret being here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Seeing this, seeing you, it matters. Even if it can't go further. Armin nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. It does matter, he agreed. And maybe that's enough, for now. To know, without acting. To understand without breaking what we care about. We lingered there for a moment longer, the house silent around us, holding our unspoken agreement. Secret Rome had revealed more than sketches, journals, or personal reflections. It had exposed the delicate, vulnerable truths of our hearts. And though we would step back from temptation, we could not unsee what had been shown, nor unfeel the connection that had blossomed so unexpectedly. The sound of the front door opening startled us. Mariam had returned earlier than expected, carrying a small bag from her errands. She called out cheerfully, unaware of the quiet intensity we had shared. Armin's shoulders relaxed instantly, the tension dissipating into the habitual motions of family life. I followed him into the living room, placing a careful distance between us, both of us aware that the line we had approached could not be crossed. Mariam smiled at us, oblivious to the invisible tension that had just existed in the house, and I returned her smile with a practiced warmth that belied the storm of emotions still swirling inside me. Later, as I prepared to leave, I caught one last look from Armin, a fleeting glance that carried the weight of understanding, restraint, and a shared secret. It was an acknowledgement that what had occurred in Secret Rome would remain ours alone, a hidden chapter in a story that could not unfold further. Walking out into the night, the quiet streets stretched ahead, familiar yet distant. I reflected on the delicate balance between desire and responsibility, connection and consequence. The night had shown me that emotional bonds could be as powerful, and as dangerous, as any physical act. And sometimes, the truest form of care is knowing when to step back. Even as the door closed behind me, Secret Rome lingered, not as a place, but as a memory, a lesson, and a silent promise, that some truths are too fragile to touch, yet too real to ignore. The next morning carried a heaviness I couldn't quite shake. I woke with the sense that something had already gone too far, even though, by every visible measure, nothing had happened at all. The house sounded normal, dishes clinking in the kitchen, faint conversation, the hum of a day beginning. Yet beneath all of it was a quiet current I couldn't ignore. When I stepped out of my room, I saw my sister heading downstairs with a list in her hand, already caught up in the momentum of her tasks. She smiled at me briefly, unaware of the tangled thoughts I carried. I forced myself to smile back, hoping it looked natural. He appeared a few moments later from the opposite hallway. We froze for the smallest second before exchanging a polite, almost too casual greeting. Something unspoken crossed between us, something we both tried not to acknowledge. He walked past me toward the kitchen, and I followed a few minutes later, pretending I needed water. My sister was on a call, distracted again, her voice drifting in and out of the room. When she stepped into the yard, the house fell into a quiet that felt pointed. He looked up from the counter when he heard her leave, and our eyes met, briefly, but enough. "You're leaving tomorrow?" he asked, though my sister must have told him already. I nodded. "I think it's best. I have things to take care of." "You didn't before," he said softly, not accusing, just acknowledging the shift between us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He sighed as if his thoughts were as heavy as mine. The silence stretched, and I felt myself growing tense. I didn't mean for any of this to make you uncomfortable, he said. It's not that, I murmured. I don't know what to do with the way things feel. For a moment he didn't blink. I don't know either. There was a vulnerability in his voice I hadn't heard before. And somehow it made everything more dangerous, not less. Before either of us could say more, my sister returned. He stepped aside immediately, wiping down the counter, his posture shifting back into something neutral. I forced myself to breathe normally, though my heartbeat was far from steady. The rest of the morning passed in small, careful interactions. Each time he entered a room, I found an excuse to leave. Each time I sat down, he chose to be somewhere else. We were avoiding something that had no name, something neither of us understood but both of us feared. Later in the afternoon, my sister asked him to check something near the back of the house. I went to fold laundry in the guest room, hoping the small task would settle my mind. But a few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. He stood in the doorway, hesitating as if deciding whether he should stay or go. I needed to talk to you, he said quietly. I put the clothes down, bracing myself. About what? About yesterday, about the room, about everything. His voice carried an honesty that felt fragile. I didn't plan any of it. But something changed. Between us. I felt it. Hearing him say it out loud made my stomach twist. You shouldn't, I whispered. We shouldn't. I know. He took a slow breath. But denying it doesn't make it less real. I looked away, focusing on the half-folded shirt in my hands. What do you want from me? He shook his head. Nothing. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know you weren't imagining it. I was there too. His words hit harder than anything he could have done physically. They brought clarity and confusion at the same time. Your wife is my sister, I said, voice barely steady. This can't go anywhere. I'm aware, he said with a quiet ache. I'm not trying to break anything. I just connected with you in a way I didn't expect. That confession stayed between us for several long seconds. It was wrong. It was honest. It was both at once. We heard footsteps again, my sister moving somewhere near the hallway, and the moment snapped apart instantly. He stepped back, forcing distance between us, and I resumed folding laundry with trembling hands. That evening, everything felt strained. My sister chatted with me about casual things while he sat across the room, never once looking directly at me but somehow always aware of where I was. I caught his reflection in the window once, his expression thoughtful, conflicted, tired. When the house finally grew quiet at night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my bag already half-packed. I wasn't sure if I was running away or saving myself, or saving them. Maybe all three. Lying down, I realized something painful. Emotional lines are the ones that blur the fastest, and the hardest to erase. The high room had shifted something inside both of us, and no matter how far I traveled tomorrow, it wouldn't disappear easily. Sleep came slowly, and when it finally did, it carried the heavy truth I didn't want to face. Nothing had happened, and yet everything had. I woke early on the day I planned to leave, long before the sun rose high enough to warm the windows. The house was still, wrapped in that quiet softness that comes before a family wakes, and for a moment I let myself stand in the hallway and breathe it in. Leaving felt necessary, but it also felt like stepping away from something unresolved, something I didn't entirely understand but knew I shouldn't stay near. I packed the last of my things slowly, trying not to make noise. Every folded shirt, every zipper pulled shut felt like a reminder of the feelings I was choosing to walk away from. When I finished, I stood in the middle of the small guest room and let the silence settle around me. It felt like a pause, a moment suspended between what had almost happened and what never would. Downstairs, my sister was already awake, tying her hair back while scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. You're up early. Are you sure you want to leave today? You can stay a little longer. I shook my head gently. I should get back. I have things to handle. She sighed, disappointed but understanding. At least eat something before you go. I made breakfast. I nodded, though my appetite was nowhere to be found. Every step toward the kitchen carried a heaviness I didn't show. I sat at the table while she moved around the room, talking about her plans for the week, the kids, small things that filled the space easily. I answered her with small smiles and light responses, my thoughts drifting again and again to the high room and the quiet tension that had grown in its walls. He appeared a few minutes later, his footsteps soft, his expression carefully neutral. He greeted me politely, as though we were nothing more than two people sharing a calm morning before a goodbye. My sister didn't notice the stiffness in the air, but I did, and so did he. Breakfast passed with small exchanges, his voice steady, mine kept soft, both of us guarded. When my sister stepped out to check something outside, the quiet that followed closed in fast. He didn't move closer, he simply stood with his hands resting lightly on the back of a chair, looking down for a long moment before speaking. "You're really leaving?" It wasn't a question, just a quiet acknowledgement. "Yes," I said, "I think it's better." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. "I understand." A beat of silence stretched between us, heavy and delicate at the same time. "I didn't mean for things to get complicated," he said, his tone low and sincere. "But they did." I swallowed hard. "I know, and staying longer would only make it worse." His jaw tightened, not out of anger but something closer to regret. "I wish I could explain what that room did," he murmured. "It made things clearer. Even the things that shouldn't be." I felt something inside me knot at his honesty. "It wasn't the room," I said quietly. "It was us." He lifted his gaze then, finally meeting mine fully, and for the first time since everything shifted, neither of us looked away. It was a moment without touch, without closeness, yet it felt deeper than anything physical could have been. My sister's voice from the yard snapped the moment apart. He stepped back, and I exhaled the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I should go," I said. He nodded once, slow and reluctant. "I'll walk you out." We moved through the house in silence, down the familiar hallway, past the staircase that led to the high room neither of us dared look toward. At the door, my sister hugged me tightly, talking about plans for the next visit. I hugged her back with a heaviness she couldn't understand. When she stepped away, he remained by the doorway as I walked outside. The distance between us felt strange, too close and too far at the same time. I reached my car, opened the door, and paused when I heard him speak softly behind me. "If things were different," he stopped himself, letting the unfinished sentence hang between us. He didn't need to say the rest. "Maybe in another life," I answered, my voice steady but full. "But not this one." He lowered his gaze, accepting the truth neither of us could change. I got into the car, closed the door softly, and started the engine. Through the window, I saw him still standing there, not reaching out, not stepping forward, just watching with a quiet ache he wouldn't voice again. As I pulled away, the house grew smaller in the mirror. The road ahead stretched long and unfamiliar, but it felt honest. The wind from the open window cooled my face, and for the first time in days, I breathed without hesitation. Yet even as the distance widened, the image of the high room stayed with me, the silent space where a line had blurred, where something unspoken had formed and then been left behind. I knew I had done the right thing. But the truth settled deep inside me. Some connections don't vanish when you walk away. They remain, quiet, suspended, unfinished, living in the spaces where nothing happened, and everything almost did.